4-piece Severed Fates versus 2-piece Thundering Fury and 2-piece Gladiator / Shiminawa. Which is better for Yae? That's the topic of today's video. What's up guys, it's the Ara Ara Archon here, Strife. I know it's been a while. But let's not waste any time and get into the video. Alright, I'm gonna fly through Yae's kit now, since I'm sure most of you watching are familiar with it already. Tamamo no Mai is a 5-star limited Electro Catalyst user who ascends crit rate, has the 4th highest attack stat in the game, but conversely has the 4th lowest HP stat for all of the 5 stars, and she has the lowest defense stat in the game. Her autos are a 3-hit combo and her charge attack is different from the other Catalyst users, but that's not what we're going to be focusing on for today. Her E gives you 3 charges in the form of Fox turrets that automatically target and attack nearby enemies, and they will deal more damage if chained together. They have level stacks of 1 to 3 depending on how many turrets are deployed. This is on an extremely short 4-second cooldown per turret, and its duration is 14 seconds, so you can have these up forever. Also, it's worth noting that turrets have more range than Oz. Her Q is a big 1 to 4 hit burst depending on how many E turrets are on the field, 2 hits if there's 1 turret, 3 for 2, and 4 for 3. I should note that this is on an extremely high multiplier, which goes up to over 1000% at crowned, and this is the only other 90 cost in the game right now, and this is on a 22-second cooldown, which is also the highest in the game. Her first passive resets the cooldown of one of her turrets if another is destroyed, and this helps with her uptime. Second passive scales her turret's damage off of her EM with a 1 EM to 0.15% damage ratio. Her third passive is nice, but it's not combat oriented, so I'm gonna skip that for this video. Alright, now that we know her kit, it's pretty apparent that Yae is designed for off-field DPS with her turrets, and once you get enough charge, you nut and go for Q. For artifacts, we'll talk about main stats and substats you'll want before going into which set to use. For her hat, you would want crit damage ideally since she ascends crit rate, but if you can't get enough rate from substats, just bite the bullet and stick with a crit rate hat. For cup, it's going to be electro damage since she's a catalyst user and every form of damage of hers is electro. If you don't have a good one, an EM cup or an attack cup is a good second choice. For hourglass, it's really going to depend on your substats, but ideally it's going to be attack percent, EM, and then recharge, especially if you run Severed Fates. Run EM if you want high turret damage because of her second passive. Alright, for substats, you want a standard DPS spread with both crit rate and crit damage, and attack percent. However, since her kit's kinda greedy, you're gonna need EM and recharge as well. So that means she literally needs every single stat except HP and defense, making her one of, if not the hardest character to build in the entire game. Yes, even more than Thomas the Train. Okay, on to sets. There's a ton of ways to build her, since she's the only other 5-star limited character without a dedicated 4-piece set. Yet. There's a lot of flexibility for her. 4-piece Thunder Soother for electro damage, 4-piece Wanderer's Trope for charge attack and E damage, 4-piece Severed Fates for Q damage, 4-piece Thundering Fury for reaction damage, 2-piece Gladiator and 2-piece Shiminawa to give her attack, 2-piece Fury, 2-piece Glad / Shim for electro damage, 2-piece Noblesse and 2-piece Glad / Shim for strong Q damage, and 2-piece Noblesse and 2-piece Wonders for a hybrid Q and E damage build. I just listed off 8 potential builds, but I'm only going to compare 2 of them, since there's only 24 hours in a day. So here's 4-piece Fates versus 2-piece Fury and 2-piece Glad / Shim. Of course it's pretty hard to match up stats, but the crit ratios aren't too far apart and the attack is close enough. However, I will say that EM is a bit lopsided, so this test will slightly be favoring a 2-2 build. Also, I should note that the Severed Fates build has an EM hourglass to make it a more even playing field instead of a recharge one. As you saw, the 2-2 build has higher damage for the turrets, but the 4-piece Fates had higher damage for the Q. Both are pretty similar in overall performance, so it's really going to diverge once you consider which you want to prioritize. Do you want your Yae to be a nuker? Then 4-piece Fates. Or do you want to deal consistent damage over time with their E's? Then 2-piece Fury and Glad / Shim. Another factor is going to be recharge, since Yae is the most energy hungry character in the entire game. If you have a high enough ER stat, I'd say around 200% or so, and or have C1, which I'll talk about later, then the 2-2 option is the way to go. Overall, I think that the 2-2 build is better in terms of the damage output, since her cooldown on her Q is quite long, but personally I like spamming my Qs, so I'm gonna stick with Severed Fates. For weapons, obviously Kagura is the best for fluffy tails. I mean, it's literally made for her. But a good second choice is Widsif, since his secondary stat is crit damage as well, and has a chance to give a fat EM boost, elemental damage, or an attack buff. But do be warned, since Widsif is RNG, this may lead to inconsistent runs in Abyss or any other kind of time-sensitive content. For Constellations, C1 as mentioned before helps with her energy recharge issue, as each turret being placed gives her 8 energy, and if used all 3 times, that becomes 24 energy recharged. C2 increases your turret's initial charge from 1 to 2 and maxes out at 4, and the range is increased by 60%. C3 increases her E level by 3, blah blah blah. C4 is a support-oriented one that gives your team an additional 20% electro damage for 5 seconds after her E hits an opponent. This is really good for mono-electro teams. C5 increases her Q level by 3, blah blah blah. C6 is basically the same as Raiden C2 in the sense that her E ignores 60% of enemies' defense, which is broken as hell. For teams, I'm only going to talk about Ara characters as per tradition, so obviously if you have C6 Sara, slap her onto the team. Raiden will help with recharge, and Jean for VV debuff and healing, since Yai is really squishy. So in this case, you can play Yai as both an off-field DPS and a burst DPS, who will alternate with Raiden if you have sufficient recharge. Since Yai's burst cost is 90, she helps Raiden gain the most stacks, so if that's not synergy, I don't know what is. It's not like they have lore together or anything. And for a closer look at this team, this video right here goes into detail on their builds and how much synergy this team has. Except, instead of Yai, it's Beidou. But in this demonstration, I'm going to be showing her as a burst DPS. First, for setup, use Raiden's E to increase Yai's Q damage. Then switch to Yai and set up all 3 of her turrets to build up stacks and to inflict electro damage onto your enemy. Then switch to Jean to VV Shred with her E or Q. Then switch to Sara and use her Q to get the attack buff, Noblesse, and C6 active. And finally switch back to Yai and Q to use up all of the buffing and debuffing. This should give big nuke numbers. Obviously Bennett would help more than Raiden here for damage, except Raiden helps more for recharging the team and leads to much more consistency. Anyway, here's the team with a WoW music over it, enjoy. Well, that's about it. Good luck on your AI builds, join the Discord, hang out with me on Twitch. I think about making Ara 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 with Shanha, but anyway, I'll see you guys in 8 months when I decide to make another voice video. Bye.